My name is Marco, and at 68 years old, I never expected to be homeless. After my wife passed, my daughter Lisa and her husband Derek invited me to live in their guest suite. I spent months renovating that house for them, pouring my heart into every detail. The irony cuts deep. I never thought the home I poured my heart into would become the place where I'd feel most unwelcome. If you've ever been blindsided by family, stay with me and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. I built my construction business from nothing over 40 years ago. Started with just a pickup truck, a toolbox, and a desperate need to provide for my family. By the time I retired, Marco's Construction employed 37 people and had built or renovated hundreds of homes across 3 counties. I took pride in my work, always insisting on quality materials and proper techniques. My reputation meant everything to me. Maria, my wife of 42 years, was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. We fought hard, trying every treatment available, but cancer is a merciless enemy. She passed away 2 years ago this October. The day I lost her, I lost the cornerstone of my life. Every room in our house held memories that became too painful to face each morning. Our family home was spacious, built for the family we raised together. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a finished basement where our kids played, and the kitchen where Maria worked her culinary magic. After she was gone, the emptiness of those rooms became unbearable. The sounds of her laughter no longer echoed through the halls. I would find myself sitting alone at our dining table, staring at her empty chair. When Lisa suggested I sell the house and move in with them, it seemed like the perfect solution. Their home was a beautiful Tudor style in a nice neighborhood, purchased about 5 years ago. They had a guest suite on the first floor with its own bathroom and a small sitting area. "It would be perfect for you, Dad," Lisa said. "You deserve to rest and let us take care of you for a change." Derek nodded in agreement, though looking back I should have noticed his hesitation. "The guest suite has its own entrance too, so you'll have independence," he added. What they didn't mention at the time was that the house needed significant work. The previous owners had neglected maintenance, and there were serious issues with the plumbing, electrical, and foundation. The guest suite itself was unfinished, just a basic room with concrete floors and exposed insulation. I offered to help with renovations, drawing on my decades of experience. "Let me save you the contractor fees," I insisted. What followed was 6 months of intensive work. I coordinated with specialists for the foundation repairs, while handling much of the other work myself. I installed new hardwood floors throughout the house, renovated both bathrooms, and completely transformed the guest suite into a comfortable living space with high-end finishes. By my conservative estimate, I saved them over $100,000 in labor and materials, using my industry contacts to get wholesale prices. I paid for the guest suite materials myself, considering it my investment in my new home. Derek seemed appreciative at the time, often bringing me cold beers while I worked and asking questions about the construction process. Once I moved in, I established a routine that I thought worked well for everyone. I woke early, made coffee, and often prepared breakfast before Lisa and Derek came downstairs. 3 days a week, I cooked dinner, usually Italian recipes passed down from my mother. Lasagna, homemade pasta with meatballs, chicken parmesan. These family dinners initially seemed to bring us closer together. Derek worked as a financial advisor at a growing firm downtown. He was ambitious, always talking about his next promotion or important client. In the beginning, he would ask for my advice about home maintenance or even about financial decisions, respecting my business experience. I enjoyed those conversations, feeling like I was developing a father-son relationship with him. The first signs of trouble appeared gradually. Derek started coming home later, missing the dinners I prepared. When he did join us, he spent most of the time on his phone, barely participating in conversations. He began making small comments about my presence in their space. "The living room TV is a bit loud, Marco, or we need to work out a schedule for the kitchen." Lisa tried to smooth things over, making excuses for his behavior. "He's under a lot of pressure at work," she would tell me. "His boss is demanding more client acquisitions this quarter." I understood pressure and backed off, trying to make myself less noticeable around the house. 6 months after I moved in, we had a family dinner that clearly illustrated the changing dynamic. I had prepared my special osso buco, a dish that takes hours to perfect. Derek arrived home as we were sitting down to eat. "Something smells strong," he said, wrinkling his nose as he loosened his tie. "Dad made osso buco," Lisa replied with forced brightness. "Your favorite." Derek served himself a small portion. "I had a client lunch today. Not very hungry." Throughout the meal, he answered texts and emails on his phone, while Lisa and I attempted conversation. When I asked about his workday, he gave one-word answers. When Lisa mentioned weekend plans, he suddenly remembered a networking event he needed to attend. After dinner, as I cleaned the kitchen, I overheard them talking in low voices in the living room. "Your parents called again about visiting," Lisa said. "They want to come for 2 weeks next month," Derek replied. "They're talking about maybe moving closer to us." "Where would they stay for 2 weeks?" "The guest suite island." I know. We'll figure something out." Their voices dropped even lower, and I couldn't hear the rest. But a feeling of unease settled in my stomach as I dried the dishes. Derek's parents, Harold and Judith, had visited twice since I moved in. Both times, Judith had made comments about the guest suite. "What a lovely space," she had said during their last visit. "It would be perfect for longer stays." At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Now, I wasn't so sure. As summer turned to fall, Derek became increasingly bold in his dismissal of my presence. The subtle comments evolved into direct criticism, often in front of others. During a small dinner party with their friends, I had prepared my signature tiramisu for dessert. "Marco insists on taking over the kitchen whenever we have guests," Derek said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes I think he forgets whose house this island." The table fell uncomfortably silent. I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment, but I forced a smile. "Just trying to contribute," I said lightly. "We appreciate it, Dad," Lisa added quickly, shooting her husband a look. Later that week, I was reading in the living room when I overheard Derek and Lisa talking in the kitchen, their voices carrying more than they realized. "He's always underfoot," Derek complained. "I come home wanting peace and quiet, and he's always there in the common areas. He's trying to be part of the family," Lisa defended. "What do you want him to do? Stay locked in the guest suite all day?" "That wouldn't be the worst idea," Derek muttered. "My colleagues don't have their in-laws living with them. He's my father, Derek, and he helped us so much with the house. That was his choice. We didn't force him to do all that work." I quietly returned to my room, their words following me like a shadow. The home I had poured so much effort into no longer felt welcoming. I began spending more time in my suite, only emerging when necessary. I started preparing simpler meals that required less time in the kitchen, often eating alone in my room to avoid another uncomfortable encounter. Derek's parents visited again in October, staying at a nearby hotel. This time, their comments about the guest suite were more pointed. "This space would be perfect for us during our longer visits," Judith said while Derek showed them around. "The private entrance would give everyone their privacy." Harold nodded in agreement. "It must be convenient having your own little apartment, Marco." "It's worked out well," I replied, noticing how Derek and Judith exchanged glances. That evening, Judith brought up retirement communities during dinner. "Our friends the Johnsons moved into Sunset Meadows last year. They love it. So many activities and people their own age to socialize with." "That sounds nice," I said non-committally. "They have an opening in a 1-bedroom unit," she continued. "I mentioned your name to the director when I was getting information for ourselves. I nearly choked on my water." "That's thoughtful, but I'm quite happy with my current living situation." Lisa looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Derek changed the subject, but the message had been clearly delivered. The next day, I tried to connect with Derek, hoping to improve our relationship. He mentioned needing to repair the deck railing, and I offered to help. "I've got it handled," he said dismissively. "I've already called a handyman." "I could save you the money," I suggested. "I built decks for 20 years. "No offense, Marco, but I'd prefer a professional who's currently in the business," he replied. "Besides, at your age, you shouldn't be doing that kind of work." The dismissal stung worse than any physical injury I'd sustained on a construction site. At my age, I was still perfectly capable of basic repairs, especially having spent a lifetime in construction. But more than that, it was the rejection of my offer to help, to contribute, to be useful. A few days later, I noticed something odd. The family photos I had placed in the hallway, including several of Maria, had been moved. When I asked Lisa about it, she looked embarrassed. "Derek thought we should rearrange things a bit," she said. "Make the space more cohesive." "More cohesive? Those were pictures of your mother. They're just in a different spot, Dad. In the den instead of the main hallway. I found them later, tucked away on a small shelf where they were barely visible. Next to them was a framed photo of Derek with his parents, prominently displayed. The symbolism wasn't subtle. As November arrived, I began to hear Lisa and Derek having hushed conversations that abruptly ended when I entered the room. One afternoon, while they were both at work, I needed to find some tax documents Lisa had offered to help me with. While looking through the home office desk drawer, I found a brochure for Golden Years Senior Living, with notes in Derek's handwriting about costs and availability. The discovery hit me like a physical blow. They were actively looking into places to send me. I carefully returned the brochure exactly as I found it and went back to my room, feeling sick to my stomach. That evening, I called my old friend Thomas, who had gone through a similar situation with his daughter and son-in-law. "They're trying to get rid of me, Tom," I said quietly into the phone, looking at senior housing without even talking to me about it. "It happens more than people realize," he replied sadly. My son-in-law was the same way, saw me as an inconvenience. "What did you do?" I confronted them directly. It didn't change things, but at least everything was out in the open. I considered his advice, but decided against an immediate confrontation. My relationship with Lisa was already strained, and I didn't want to force her to choose sides openly. Instead, I decided to watch and wait, hoping things might improve naturally. The next day, I made an effort to remind Lisa of our relationship before Derek. I pulled out old photo albums and invited her to look through them with me on a Saturday, when Derek was golfing with clients. "Remember this fishing trip?" I asked, pointing to a photo of 11-year-old Lisa proudly holding up a trout. "You were so determined to catch a bigger fish than your brother." She smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. "You were so patient, teaching me to cast over and over." We spent 2 hours going through memories, and I felt the connection between us strengthening. When Derek returned home, however, her demeanor immediately changed, becoming more guarded. Later that week, I overheard another conversation that confirmed my worst fears. "My parents are seriously considering the move," Derek was saying. "Dad's retiring in January, and they want to be closer to us." "What about my dad?" Lisa asked. "That's what we need to discuss. The guest suite would be perfect for them. It has the private entrance, and they could come and go without disturbing us." "And where would Dad go?" There was a long pause before Derek answered. "We need to talk to him about alternative living arrangements. He'd be happier with people his own age anyway." "I don't know, Derek. After everything he did for us with the house, that was over a year ago. We can't base our future decisions on past favors." I retreated silently to my room, my heart heavy with the knowledge that my days in this home were numbered. But as I sat on my bed, my eyes fell on the drawer where I kept important documents. Inside was something Derek had either forgotten or never bothered to read carefully. A smile slowly spread across my face as I realized I might have one card left to play. The weeks following my discovery of Derek's plans were increasingly difficult. What had once been subtle hints about my presence became daily reminders that I was unwelcome. Derek excluded me from family decisions, even those that directly affected me. When they decided to renovate the kitchen, I learned about it only when the contractors arrived. Despite my expertise in construction that could have saved them thousands. "We wanted to surprise you," Lisa explained weakly when I questioned her. "With construction noise at 7 in the morning?" I replied, unconvinced. Derek shrugged. "We made the decision last minute. No time to consult everyone." The everyone in question was only me, as Derek's parents had been fully involved in selecting cabinets and countertops. I later discovered they had contributed financially to the renovation, clearly staking their claim in the home. Lisa became increasingly distant, seemingly caught between loyalty to her father and her husband. Our conversations became superficial, limited to weather and basic household matters. Gone were our heart-to-heart talks and shared memories. When I tried to engage her about deeper topics, she would find excuses to end the conversation. "I've got to run, Dad. Conference call in 5 minutes. Can we talk about this later?" I promised Derek I'd help him with something. The final blow came on my 68th birthday in December. I had mentioned it the week before, suggesting perhaps we could have a small dinner celebration. "Of course, Dad," Lisa had said. "We'll do something special." On the day itself, I woke up hopeful, only to find the house empty. A hastily scribbled note on the counter informed me that Derek had surprised Lisa with tickets to a basketball game. Back late, leftovers in fridge. No mention of my birthday, no card, not even an acknowledgement. I spent the evening alone, eating reheated pasta and watching old westerns on television. Around 9:30, my phone chimed with a text from Lisa. "Sorry about tonight. Derek had these tickets for weeks. Happy birthday. We'll celebrate this weekend." We never did. The next morning, I attempted to discuss the situation directly with Lisa while Derek was at work. "I feel like I'm becoming a burden to you both," I began carefully. "Don't be silly, Dad," she replied, not meeting my eyes as she hurried to prepare for work. "Lisa, please, can we talk honestly? Things have changed since I moved in." She sighed, checking her watch. "Derek's under a lot of pressure at work. His parents are talking about moving closer, and we're trying to figure out how to accommodate everyone." "By everyone, you mean them, not me." "Dad, that's not fair. We're just trying to balance everyone's needs. Have you considered my needs? This was supposed to be my home, too." Her eyes filled with tears. "Can we talk about this later? I'm going to be late for my meeting." That evening, Derek's parents arrived for another visit, this time staying for a full week. Their presence in the house made the hierarchy clear. They were given the master bedroom while Derek and Lisa moved temporarily to the second bedroom. I remained in the guest suite, but now Judith made daily comments about how they would arrange the space when they visited more frequently. "This sitting area would be perfect for Harold's reading nook," she said, walking around my living space as if I were already gone. "And we'd probably replace this sofa with something more supportive for our backs." I nodded politely while seething inside. The audacity of discussing redecoration plans for my current home was breathtaking. During their stay, I noticed some of my belongings disappearing from common areas. My favorite recliner was moved from the living room to the garage to make space for holiday decorations. My woodworking tools, which I kept neatly organized in a corner of the garage, were boxed up and placed on shelves to create more parking space. When I discovered my tools packed away, I finally confronted Derek directly. "Were you planning to discuss this with me?" I asked, pointing to the boxes. "We needed the space," he replied dismissively. "Your tools were taking up an entire corner. Those are professional-grade tools that need proper storage. Some of them cost thousands of dollars. Then maybe you should consider a storage unit," he suggested. "This house isn't getting any bigger, and with my parents visiting more often." "Is that what this is about? Making room for your parents by pushing me out?" His expression hardened. "I think we need to have a discussion about living arrangements, Marco. This situation was always meant to be temporary." "Temporary? That's not what Lisa told me when I sold my house and moved in. That's not what we agreed to when I spent 6 months renovating this place. Circumstances change. My parents are retiring and want to be closer to us. The guest suite would be ideal for them since they'll be visiting regularly. And where does that leave me? We can help you find a nice retirement community. People your own age, activities, medical care if you need it." I felt my blood pressure rising, but maintained my composure. "I think Lisa should be part of this conversation." "She agrees with me," he said coolly. "She's just had a harder time bringing it up." That night, I called my brother Anthony and arranged to visit him the following weekend. I needed space to think clearly, away from the tension of the house. I also needed to retrieve some important documents from my safety deposit box at the bank. As I packed for my weekend trip, I came across the folder of legal papers related to the house. I reviewed them carefully, confirming what I already knew but had chosen not to mention. Derek had signed these documents, but had clearly never read them carefully. His mistake was about to become very apparent. I left early Friday morning for my brother Anthony's house, about 2 hours away. The drive gave me time to clear my head and consider my options. Anthony had always been my sounding board, the practical one who could see situations objectively when emotions clouded my judgment. "They're trying to force me out, Tony," I explained as we sat on his back porch, coffee mugs in hand. "For his parents?" Anthony shook his head in disbelief. "After everything you did for their house? Over $100,000 in free labor, plus materials for the guest suite that I paid for myself. Please tell me you got something in writing." I smiled for the first time in weeks. I did. Derek was so excited about saving money on renovations that he signed the agreement without reading the fine print. Anthony laughed. "The financial advisor didn't read the contract? That's rich." He skimmed it, saw the parts about me doing the work at no labor cost, and jumped to sign. Missed the clauses about property ownership and living arrangements. "So what are you going to do?" "Wait and see how far they're willing to take this. If they force my hand, I'll play my card." We spent the rest of the weekend reminiscing about our childhood, playing cards, and visiting old friends in the area. The break from tension was exactly what I needed. By Sunday afternoon, I felt refreshed and mentally prepared for whatever awaited me at home. What I wasn't prepared for was how quickly things would escalate. I arrived back at the house around 4:30 Sunday afternoon, pulling into the driveway to find Derek's parents' car parked in my usual spot. Mildly annoyed, I parked on the street and entered through the main door, calling out a greeting as I stepped inside. The living room scene stopped me cold. Derek and his father were arranging furniture that hadn't been there when I left. New end tables flanked the sofa, and an unfamiliar recliner sat where my chair had been. "Marco," Derek said, his tone artificially bright. "You're back earlier than we expected." "Clearly," I replied, looking around at the transformed space. "Where are my things?" "We need to talk about that," he said, glancing at his father, who suddenly found somewhere else to be. "There have been some changes while you were gone." "What kind of changes?" "My parents have decided to move closer immediately. Dad's retirement is happening sooner than expected, and they've sold their house." My stomach tightened. "And they need a place to stay while they look for a permanent home. The guest suite is the logical solution." The implications hung in the air between us. I kept my voice steady. "Where are my belongings, Derek?" "We've carefully packed everything and moved it to the garage for now," he said, as if he'd done me a favor. "We've arranged the boxes neatly along the wall." "You moved all my things without my knowledge or permission, while I was away for 2 days?" "We tried to call but couldn't reach you." A lie. I had checked my phone regularly all weekend, with no missed calls from their number. "Where is Lisa?" I asked, looking around for my daughter. "She's upstairs helping Mom settle in." As if on cue, Lisa appeared on the stairs, her face pale when she saw me. "Dad, you're back. Did you know about this?" I asked her directly. She couldn't meet my eyes. Derek thought it would be easier this way. A clean transition. A transition to what exactly? Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? Derek cleared his throat. "We've set up the den with the pull-out sofa as a temporary solution, just until we can help you find more suitable accommodations." "The den," I repeated. "The room without a door, next to the kitchen. That's my new bedroom?" "It's temporary," Lisa said weakly, "until we figure things out." "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, looking between them. Neither answered immediately. Finally, Derek spoke. "My parents' situation changed suddenly. We had to adapt quickly." Another lie. I had overheard them discussing this exact scenario weeks ago. "I'd like to see my things," I said, maintaining my composure with effort. Derek led me to the garage, where I found my life stacked in cardboard boxes and plastic bins. Clothes, books, photographs, toiletries, all packed haphazardly. My mattress was propped against the wall, my bed frame disassembled on the floor. "We were very careful with everything," Derek assured me, as if that made it acceptable. I nodded silently, surveying the remnants of my dignity piled like discarded items at a garage sale. Through the garage window, I could see Judith rearranging plants on the patio outside the guest suite, my former patio. "When were you planning to tell me about this change?" I asked. "We were going to call you today, But you returned earlier than expected. I turned to face him directly. And if I refuse this arrangement? His expression hardened slightly. Marco, be reasonable. My parents need our help right now. The guest suite has its own entrance and bathroom. It makes perfect sense for them to use it. And it made perfect sense for me to use it last week, and the week before that, and the year before that. Circumstances change. We can help you find a nice retirement community. There's one just 20 minutes from here with excellent amenities. I noticed Lisa had disappeared again, unwilling to witness this conversation. My own daughter, avoiding the confrontation rather than standing up for me. I see, I said quietly. My parents would be willing to contribute to the first few months' rent while you get settled, Derek added, as if offering a generous concession. I looked at the man who had married my daughter. This person who could so casually discard me after all I had contributed to their home and lives. I thought about raising my voice, about demanding justice, about pointing out the terrible disrespect being shown. Instead, I smiled. I understand completely, I said calmly. My response clearly surprised him. He had expected resistance, anger, perhaps even a scene that would justify his actions. My composure seemed to unsettle him more than any outburst would have. You do? He asked, uncertainly. Family comes first, I continued, still smiling. You want to take care of your parents. I respect that. Exactly, he said, visibly relieved. I'm glad you understand. I'll need a few days to make arrangements, I said. Of course. The den is yours as long as you need it. Within reason, of course. I nodded and began examining the boxes, looking for what I would need immediately. Derek, apparently satisfied that I had accepted defeat, left me alone in the garage. Once he was gone, I located the box containing my important documents and retrieved the folder I needed. I also found a small framed photo of Maria that had been carelessly tossed in with miscellaneous items. What would you do, my love? I whispered to her image. Her smile seemed to hold the answer. Maria had always believed in standing up for yourself while maintaining dignity. She would never have approved of creating a scene. But she also would never have let anyone, family included, treat her with such disrespect. I carefully placed the photo and documents in my overnight bag, then selected a few boxes of essential items to bring inside. The rest could wait. I had a plan forming, and it required patience. That evening, I slept on the uncomfortable pull-out sofa in the den, listening to the sounds of Derek's parents moving around in what had been my home until yesterday. Lisa came down once to check on me, asking if I needed extra blankets. I'm fine, I assured her, though nothing was fine. Dad, I'm sorry it happened this way, she said hesitantly. Derek thought it would be easier. Easier for whom? She had no answer for that. Get some rest, Lisa, I said finally. We'll talk tomorrow. But tomorrow would bring conversations she wasn't expecting. As I lay awake in the dark, I went over my options. I could create a scene, demand my space back, and cause a family rift that might never heal. Or I could approach this strategically, using the one advantage Derek didn't know I possessed. I smiled in the darkness, thinking of the document in my bag. You should have read the fine print, son, I whispered to myself before finally drifting off to sleep. To understand what happened next, we need to go back to when Lisa and Derek first purchased the house 3 years ago. They had found the property at a good price because it needed significant work. The foundation issues, outdated electrical, and poor plumbing had scared away other buyers. But Lisa fell in love with the Tudor style and neighborhood. The problem was financing. They qualified for the mortgage but couldn't afford the necessary renovations. The bank wouldn't approve a renovation loan on top of the mortgage due to Derek's recent job change and Lisa's moderate income as a teacher. We'll have to pass on it, Derek had told Lisa regretfully. The renovation costs would break us. That's when I stepped in. What if I helped with the renovations? I offered. No labor costs, just materials. Their eyes had lit up with hope, but Derek remained practical. Even materials would run $50,000 minimum. I can help with that too, I said. Having recently sold my business, I had capital available. I could provide the down payment for the house, and you could use your savings for materials. Derek was immediately interested but cautious. That's incredibly generous, Marco. but we'd want to make it official. A loan with repayment terms. Not a loan, I clarified. An investment. I'd want partial ownership. We consulted with a real estate attorney who drew up an agreement. I would provide $75,000 toward the down payment and personally oversee all renovations. In exchange, I would own 40% of the property, with specific provisions regarding the guest suite once it was completed. The key clause stated, "The guest suite, once renovated, is designated as Marco Gallucci's lifetime residence, with full access rights to common areas of the home." This provision remains in effect, regardless of other circumstances, unless voluntarily relinquished in writing by Marco Gallucci. There was also a clause requiring my written permission before any occupant could be permanently added to the household. Derek had been so focused on the financial aspects, the savings on renovation costs, and the lower mortgage payments that he had signed without thoroughly reading the residential provisions. Lisa had read it and understood, which explained her discomfort with the current situation. The morning after being displaced to the den, I contacted my longtime friend and attorney, Howard Friedman. We had worked together for decades, with Howard handling all my business contracts and personal legal matters. "They did what?" Howard exclaimed when I explained the situation over the phone. "Moved all my belongings to the garage while I was visiting Anthony. Derek's parents are now living in the guest suite that's legally designated as my residence. Do you have your copy of the agreement?" "Right in front of me." "Good. And it's been recorded with the property deed?" "Yes. The county has it on file." Howard's voice took on the confident tone I'd heard many times when he knew we had a solid case. "They can't do this, Marco. Not legally. Do you want me to contact them directly?" I considered this option. Let me try talking to Lisa first. She might not fully remember the terms of the agreement. And if that doesn't work, then we take the next step. After finishing the call, I waited until Derek left for work and his parents went out shopping. Lisa had taken the day off, perhaps anticipating the fallout from yesterday's events. I found her in the kitchen, nervously arranging flowers in a vase. "Lisa, we need to talk about the living arrangement," I began gently. "Dad, I know you're upset. It all happened so quickly. Derek's parents needed help immediately, and do you remember the agreement we signed when you bought this house?" I interrupted. She paused, the flower in her hand hovering midair. "The investment agreement?" "Yes. Do you recall the specific terms regarding the guest suite?" She placed the flower in the vase slowly, avoiding my eyes. Vaguely. "It was 3 years ago." "I have a copy here," I said, placing the document on the counter. "Section 4, paragraph 3, outlines my right to occupy the guest suite as my lifetime residence." Lisa skimmed the indicated paragraph, her face paling slightly. "I forgot about this specific wording. It's legally binding, Lisa. The guest suite is my designated residence by contract. Derek's parents cannot legally occupy it without my written consent. Dad, they've already moved in. All their things are there, and all my things are in the garage," I reminded her. "Moved without my permission while I was away." She looked genuinely distressed. "What do you want me to do?" "They've sold their house. They have nowhere else to go right now." "That's not my problem, Lisa. That's a situation Derek created without consulting me, despite legal obligations to do so. Can we work something out? Maybe you could stay with Uncle Anthony temporarily, until we find another solution." I shook my head. "I'm not the one who needs to find temporary accommodations. I have a legal right to live in the guest suite. Please, Dad. For me, just for a little while until we sort this out." The plea nearly worked. Despite everything, this was my daughter, and I loved her. But I remembered Maria's voice in my head. "Stand up for yourself, with dignity." "I'm sorry, Lisa. I've already compromised by accepting the den for now. But this needs to be resolved quickly. Derek's parents need to find alternative arrangements." "Derek won't accept this," she said, her voice small. "Derek signed a legally binding document. Whether he bothered to read it thoroughly is not my concern." As predicted, Derek was furious when Lisa told him about our conversation. He called me while I was out walking that afternoon. "Lisa mentioned you're bringing up some old agreement," he said without preamble. "Not just some old agreement. The legal document that governs ownership and occupancy rights for the house." That was about the financial investment. It has nothing to do with current living arrangements. You should read Section 4 again, I suggested calmly. It explicitly designates the guest suite as my lifetime residence. That's ridiculous. Circumstances change. You can't hold us to something signed 3 years ago. Actually, I can. It's a legally binding contract, recorded with the property deed. There was a brief silence before Derek spoke again, his tone dismissive. I'll have our attorney look at it. I'm sure there's flexibility built in for changing family needs. Feel free to consult any attorney you like. Howard Friedman, who drafted the agreement, assures me it's airtight. Howard Friedman? You've already talked to an attorney about this? His voice rose with indignation. Of course. When someone illegally removes me from my residence, I consult legal counsel. Nobody removed you illegally. We're providing alternative accommodations within the same house. The agreement specifies the guest suite. Derek, not a pull-out sofa in the den. This is ridiculous. We're family. You'd really take legal action against your own daughter? I'd prefer not to. I'd prefer you honor our legal agreement and find alternative arrangements for your parents. That's not happening, Marco. They've already moved in. They have nowhere else to go. Then, we have a problem that may require legal resolution. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. I'll give you 48 hours to consider your options before I instruct Howard to proceed with formal action. I ended the call and continued my walk, feeling strangely calm. Years of business negotiations had taught me to state boundaries clearly and stand firm when I knew I was in the right. That evening, I returned to find Lisa waiting anxiously in the kitchen. Derek's furious, she said. He says you're threatening legal action. I'm reminding him of legal obligations he already agreed to, I corrected. There's a difference. His parents are settled in the guest suite. They've unpacked everything. They can unpack somewhere else just as easily. The Residence Inn 3 miles away has monthly rates. Dad, please. Can't we find a compromise? I've been compromising since I moved in, Lisa. Making myself smaller, quieter, less visible to accommodate Derek's growing hostility. I'm done compromising. The next morning, I received a text from Derek. My attorney says we should discuss this in person. Meeting at Blackwell Law Offices tomorrow at 10 a.m. I forwarded the message to Howard, who immediately called me. Blackwell? That's Gerald Blackwell? The real estate attorney? That's my guess, I confirmed. Howard laughed. Jerry and I play golf together. He's good, but he can't change the wording of a filed contract. I'll be there with you. The following day, Howard and I arrived at Blackwell's office to find Derek, Lisa, and Gerald Blackwell waiting. Derek's expression was confident, almost smug, which suggested he believed he had found a loophole. After introductions, Gerald began diplomatically. I've reviewed the property agreement, and while the language does specify the guest suite as Mr. Gallucci's residence, there are provisions for changing circumstances that could apply here. Howard smiled politely. Which provisions specifically are you referring to? Gerald flipped through the document. Section 6 discusses modifications to the agreement by mutual consent of all parties. Exactly, Howard replied. Mutual consent. My client has not consented to any modification. There's also precedent for reasonable accommodation within the same property, Gerald continued. The den could be considered equivalent space. Howard shook his head. The agreement specifically names the guest suite with its private entrance and bathroom. A pull-out sofa in a common area with no privacy is not equivalent by any legal standard. Mr. Gallucci's ownership share remains intact regardless of which room he occupies, Gerald argued. His ownership and his residence rights are separate issues, both protected in the agreement, Howard countered. May I direct your attention to the clause regarding additional occupants? Gerald reviewed the indicated paragraph and frowned slightly. I see. What? Derek asked impatiently. What does it say? It states that no additional permanent occupants may be added to the household without Mr. Gallucci's written consent, Gerald explained reluctantly. That's absurd, Derek protested. We can't have guests in our own home? Temporary guests are not permanent occupants, Howard clarified. But moving your parents in indefinitely, without Marco's consent, is a direct violation of the agreement. Lisa, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. What if we converted another space for Dad? Made it equivalent to the guest suite? Howard looked to me for direction. I considered the proposal. That would require significant construction, I pointed out. A private bathroom, separate entrance, sitting area, and it would take months, during which time your parents would need alternative accommodations, Howard added. Derek's confidence had evaporated, replaced by barely controlled anger. This is extortion. You're using a technicality to force my parents out. No, I replied calmly. I'm enforcing an agreement you signed. An agreement that gave you this house at far below market value because of my contribution in labor. We can buy you out, Derek suddenly offered. Your 40% share. Name your price. I glanced at Howard, who nodded slightly. This was potentially a reasonable solution. Current market value is approximately $750,000, Howard stated. 40% would be $300,000, plus compensation for improvements Mr. Gallucci made personally. Derek blanched at the figure. That's impossible. We don't have that kind of liquid capital. Then I suggest you find alternative accommodations for your parents while we work toward a more feasible solution, Howard replied. The meeting ended with Derek storming out, Lisa following apologetically behind him. Howard and I remained seated with Gerald. For what it's worth, Marco, I think you're entirely in the right here, Gerald said once they were gone. Derek didn't consult me before moving his parents in. I would have advised against it had I known about this agreement. I appreciate your honesty, Gerald, I replied. What's your ultimate goal here? He asked. Full enforcement of the resident's right or financial settlement? I considered the question carefully. Primarily respect and acknowledgement of my legal rights. The financial aspect is secondary but necessary given the circumstances. Gerald nodded, understanding. I'll talk to Derek. Try to make him see reason. This could get expensive for them quickly if it proceeds to formal legal action. I'd prefer to avoid that, I agreed. But I won't be relegated to a sofa in the den of a house I partly own. As Howard and I left the office, I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. I had never wanted legal confrontation with my family, but Derek had forced my hand by his actions. What now? I asked Howard as we walked to our cars. Now we wait, he replied. The ball is in their court, but from a position of strength, not weakness. The days following the meeting at Gerald Blackwell's office were tense. I continued sleeping on the pull-out sofa in the den, while Derek frantically searched for loopholes in the agreement. He consulted 2 more attorneys, both of whom apparently gave him the same unwelcome news. The agreement was solid. Meanwhile, Derek's parents, Harold and Judith, had learned about the dispute and were indignant. We sold our house because Derek said we could stay here, Judith complained loudly one evening. Now where are we supposed to go? A hotel, an apartment, senior living, I suggested calmly. The same options you were advocating for me. Harold puffed up with outrage. That's completely different. We're family. So am I reminded him. Though that fact seems to have been forgotten recently. Derek tried a different approach, attempting to intimidate me with potential consequences. If you force this issue, it will permanently damage your relationship with Lisa, he warned. I believe our relationship was damaged when you moved my belongings to the garage without my knowledge or consent, I replied. And when Lisa stood by and allowed it to happen. 5 days after our meeting with the attorneys, Gerald Blackwell called both Derek and me to his office again. This time, he had prepared a formal analysis of the situation. I've thoroughly reviewed the agreement and consulted with colleagues specializing in property law, he began. There is no ambiguity here. Marco has a legally protected right to reside in the guest suite for his lifetime, and any permanent addition to the household requires his written consent. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. There must be some provision for changing family circumstances. There isn't, Gerald stated flatly. This is why I always advise clients to read contracts thoroughly before signing them, especially when they involve family. So what are our options? Derek asked reluctantly. Option 1. Honor the agreement as written. Mr. Gallucci returns to the guest suite, and alternative arrangements are made for your parents. Derek shook his head immediately. Not possible. They have nowhere to go. Option 2, Gerald continued. Negotiate a buyout of Mr. Gallucci's ownership share and residence rights. This would require substantial capital that you've indicated you don't currently have access to. What's option 3? Derek asked hopefully. Litigation, which I strongly advise against. The agreement is clear, and courts generally uphold such contracts, especially when they're properly filed with the property deed. You would likely lose, incur significant legal fees, and still face options 1 or 2. Derek looked defeated for the first time since this ordeal began. We need time to figure this out. How much time? I asked. 30 days. To either arrange financing for a buyout or find suitable housing for my parents. I glanced at Howard, who nodded slightly. 30 days is reasonable, I agreed. But I expect to return to the guest suite immediately. Your parents can use the den temporarily. Derek's face flushed with anger. That's not acceptable. They're in their 70s. They can't sleep on a pull-out sofa. I'm 68, I reminded him. Apparently you found it acceptable for me. Gerald cleared his throat. Perhaps a short-term compromise? Mr. Gallucci could stay with his brother temporarily, with Derek covering any associated costs and a written agreement regarding the 30-day timeline. I considered the proposal. Extending my stay with Anthony wasn't ideal, but it would give everyone time to adjust while maintaining my legal position. I could agree to that, I said finally, with specific terms in writing. Howard drafted an interim agreement on the spot. I would stay with Anthony for up to 30 days while Derek either arranged financing for a buyout or found alternative housing for his parents. Derek would cover all my expenses during this period, plus a $1,000 inconvenience fee. If no resolution was reached within 30 days, I would return to the guest suite regardless of other circumstances. Derek signed reluctantly, clearly unhappy but out of options. I left the meeting with mixed feelings. I had maintained my legal rights and dignity, but at the cost of further straining family relationships. Lisa had been notably absent from the meeting, unable or unwilling to face the conflict directly. That evening, as I packed for an extended stay at Anthony's, Lisa finally came to speak with me privately. "Dad, I'm so sorry about all this," she said, her eyes red from crying. "I never wanted things to happen this way." "Neither did I, sweetheart. I feel caught in the middle between you and Derek." "You're not in the middle, Lisa. You're my daughter, and this is partly your house too. You signed the same agreement Derek did, but you actually read it." She looked away guiltily. I remembered the ownership percentage, but I forgot the specific details about the guest suite and approval for new occupants. "Or chose to forget when it became inconvenient," I suggested gently. "That's not fair, isn't it? You watched Derek plan this for weeks. You heard him discussing moving his parents in. You knew about the senior living brochures. Yet you said nothing, did nothing to stop it. I tried talking to him, but he was determined. His parents needed help, and I didn't? After everything I've done for you both?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I made a terrible mistake. I should have stood up to him." "Yes, you should have. But it's not too late to start." The next day, I moved temporarily to Anthony's house, while Derek began searching for either financing options or alternative housing for his parents. News of the situation had spread among Derek's colleagues at the financial firm where he worked. Several expressed surprise that a financial advisor would sign a contract without reading it thoroughly, damaging his professional reputation. "Heard your son-in-law got outmaneuvered by his father-in-law," one of his clients commented after moving their portfolio to another advisor. "Makes me question his attention to detail with my investments." This professional embarrassment seemed to affect Derek more deeply than the legal issues themselves. His carefully cultivated image of competence had been tarnished, and clients were beginning to question his judgment. Meanwhile, his parents remained in the guest suite, becoming increasingly anxious as the 30-day deadline approached. They made several half-hearted attempts to view apartments, but rejected each one as too small, too expensive, or too far from Lisa and Derek's home. "We sold our house because Derek promised we could stay here," Judith repeated to anyone who would listen. "Now we're being forced out by his wife's father." The narrative positioning me as the villain spread through their social circle, eventually reaching my friends and former colleagues. Most who knew me understood there was more to the story, particularly those familiar with my contributions to the house. 3 weeks into the 30-day period, With little progress made toward either a buyout or relocation for his parents, Derek requested another meeting. This time, he asked to meet just with me, without attorneys present. We met at a coffee shop, halfway between our homes. Derek looked tired, the strain of recent weeks evident on his face. "I want to propose a compromise," he began without preamble. "I'm listening. We convert the basement into an equivalent living space for you. Private bathroom, separate entrance, sitting area, everything the guest suite has. That would take months of construction," I pointed out. "Where would I live in the meantime? With your brother, with us covering expenses as agreed. Once the space is ready, you would have a permanent residence in the house, fulfilling the legal requirement." I considered the proposal. "And your parents would remain in the guest suite permanently?" "Yes, that's the idea. The basement has low ceilings and small windows. It's not equivalent space, Derek. We'll make it nice, I promise. Top quality finishes, proper lighting, whatever you want." I could see he was desperate, running out of options as the deadline approached. "What does Lisa think of this plan?" His hesitation told me everything. She isn't entirely convinced it's the best solution, because she knows the basement floods during heavy rains, because she remembers that I specifically chose the guest suite for its natural light and easy access to the backyard. Derek sighed heavily. "What do you want, Marco? Really? Is this about the living space or something else?" "It's about respect," I replied simply. "Respect for my contributions to your home, for my legal rights, and for me as a person. You treated me like an inconvenience to be discarded when something better came along. That's not true. We were trying to help my parents by hurting me in the process, by moving my belongings without my knowledge or consent, by assuming I would just accept whatever scraps of accommodation you offered." He had no response to that. "Here's my compromise," I said finally. "I'll agree to sell my ownership share at a fair market value, payable over 5 years with interest. But I won't live in the basement, and I won't return to a household where I'm clearly unwelcome." "Where will you go?" "I've been looking at condominiums near Anthony. 2-bedroom, main floor, with a community of active seniors nearby." Derek looked relieved. "That sounds perfect for you." "It would be, but it requires capital I don't currently have liquid. My investment is in your house. We can arrange financing for the buyout," he said quickly. "I've been talking to lenders." "Good. Have Howard and Gerald draw up the papers. But understand this. My relationship with Lisa will continue regardless of where I live, and she will always be welcome in my home, wherever that may be." "Of course," he agreed readily. "And one more thing," I added. "I want an apology, not just from you, but from your parents as well, for the disrespect shown and the disruption caused." His face tightened, pride warring with necessity. "I can apologize for how things were handled. It could have been done better." "That's not an apology, Derek. That's an acknowledgement with passive voice to avoid responsibility." He sighed heavily. "Fine. I'm sorry for moving your things without permission and for not honoring our agreement. It was wrong. And your parents, I'll talk to them." The next day, Lisa called me in tears. "Dad, I heard about your compromise. Are you sure this is what you want? It's the best solution for everyone, given the circumstances. But you'd be giving up your home, your investment. I'd be exchanging it for a new home, one where I'm the sole owner and decision maker. I feel terrible about all of this," she admitted. "I should have prevented it." "Yes, you should have. But we all make mistakes, Lisa. The important thing is learning from them. I want to come see the condominiums with you. Help you pick one." "I'd like that," I replied, feeling the first real connection with my daughter in months. 2 days later, Derek's parents finally offered a reluctant apology, clearly prompted by their son rather than genuine remorse. Judith managed to make it sound like she was the injured party who was being magnanimous, but I accepted it with grace, knowing it was the best I could expect. The legal paperwork for the buyout was prepared by Howard and Gerald working together. Derek secured financing to pay me $150,000 immediately, with the remaining $150,000 plus interest to be paid over 5 years. The payments were secured by a lien on the house, ensuring I would be protected even if Derek and Lisa ran into financial difficulties. With the initial payment, I was able to purchase a comfortable condominium in Anthony's community. Lisa helped me shop for furniture and set up my new home, our relationship slowly mending through shared activities and honest conversations. 6 months after the confrontation, the new arrangement had settled into a workable pattern. Derek maintained a polite but distant relationship with me, fulfilling his financial obligations punctually. His parents had permanently moved into the guest suite, though I heard through Lisa that they were already discussing wanting a larger space. Lisa visited me regularly, sometimes with her children but never with Derek. Our relationship had been damaged but not destroyed, and we were gradually rebuilding trust. The most unexpected development was my own social life. The condominium community had numerous activities for residents, and I found myself making new friends quickly. I joined an Italian cooking class where I met Eleanor, a widow with a quick wit and warm smile. Our friendship was evolving into something more, bringing joy I hadn't expected to find again after Maria's passing. 6 months turned into a year, and life settled into new patterns. My condominium became a true home, filled with both memories from my past and new experiences. The walls displayed photographs of Maria alongside new images of friends from the community. The kitchen, once just a sterile space of appliances and countertops, now carried the aromas of countless Italian meals prepared for neighbors and family. Lisa continued visiting regularly, our relationship slowly healing through honest conversations and shared experiences. Her children, my grandchildren, loved the community pool and game room in my building, making my home a destination they looked forward to rather than an obligation. The kids keep asking when they can visit Grandpa Marco again. Lisa told me during one of our weekly phone calls. Tommy says your spaghetti and meatballs are better than the restaurants. Bring them this weekend, I suggested. Eleanor found a recipe for chocolate cannoli that they might enjoy helping with. The mention of Eleanor brought a smile to Lisa's voice. How are things going with her? Wonderfully, I admitted. She understands what it means to love someone for decades and then have to build a life without them. We support each other. Eleanor and I had developed a deep connection, both of us navigating life after losing long-term spouses. We didn't try to replace what we had lost, but instead created something new together. We enjoyed cooking classes, community events, and quiet evenings watching old movies. Neither of us rushed toward formal commitments, content to let our relationship evolve naturally. Derek remained distant but correctly respectful in our limited interactions. He fulfilled his financial obligations without complaint, perhaps realizing that the alternative would have been far more costly. His parents continued living in the guest suite, though Lisa confided that their presence had created its own tensions in the household. They treat the entire house as their domain now, she admitted during one visit. Mom rearranged my kitchen without asking, and Dad criticizes how we raise the children. I resisted the urge to point out the irony. That must be challenging. Derek keeps saying it's temporary, but they've made no effort to find their own place. Perhaps boundaries need to be established, I suggested gently. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. You're right. I've been avoiding conflict, but that's what got us into trouble before. Watching my daughter learn to stand up for herself was one of the unexpected positive outcomes of this difficult chapter. The painful experience had forced her to examine her priorities and values, strengthening her character in the process. For myself, the journey from betrayal to resolution had taught me valuable lessons about family, boundaries, and self-respect. I had learned that family connections, while precious, did not obligate me to accept mistreatment. Standing up for myself hadn't destroyed relationships worth preserving, but it actually created the foundation for healthier ones. The legal protections I had wisely established years earlier had provided a safety net when emotions and family dynamics became complicated. Business experience had taught me to get agreements in writing, and that foresight had ultimately protected my interests when goodwill eroded. My new community offered friendship and activities that kept me engaged and active. The senior center nearby offered woodworking classes where I could continue practicing skills from my construction days. I volunteered twice monthly to teach basic home repair skills to young homeowners, finding satisfaction in passing knowledge to the next generation. Eleanor and I joined a travel group that organized short trips to nearby states, adventures that Maria and I had always planned for retirement but never experienced. During a weekend in Charleston, as we walked along the historic waterfront, Eleanor linked her arm through mine. "You know what I admire most about you, Marco?" she asked. "My Italian cooking?" I joked. She smiled. "Your resilience. You faced a painful situation with your family, but instead of becoming bitter, you created a new chapter that's even better in some ways." "I had moments of bitterness," I admitted. "Nights when I lay awake wondering how my son-in-law could discard me so easily, how my daughter could stand by and let it happen. But you didn't let those feelings consume you. Maria wouldn't have wanted that. She always said that holding on to anger only punishes yourself." One year after purchasing my condominium, I invited Lisa and her family, including Derek, for a dinner party. Also present were Anthony and his wife Eleanor, and several friends from the community. It was the first time Derek had visited my new home. He seemed uncomfortable initially, perhaps expecting recrimination or coldness. Instead, I greeted him cordially, treating him as I would any guest in my home. Throughout the evening, I noticed him observing the comfortable space I had created, the warm relationships with neighbors, the easy laughter around the dinner table. As guests were leaving, Derek approached me privately. "You've made a nice life here," he said, sounding almost surprised. "I have," I agreed. "I want to apologize again," he said, his voice lower. "Looking back, I handled everything badly. I put my parents' needs above yours without consideration for all you had done for us." The apology seemed genuine this time, without the defensive tone of his earlier forced apology. "Thank you for saying that, Derek. It means something. My parents are moving out next month," he added. "They found a condo they like closer to my sister. I'm sure that will be a positive change for everyone." He nodded, looking around at my home once more. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads to something better. Whether he was referring to my situation or his own remained unclear, but the observation held truth either way. After everyone had left, Eleanor helped me clean up the kitchen, both of us comfortable in the easy rhythm we had developed. "That went well," she observed. "Even with Derek." "Better than expected," I agreed. "People can surprise you, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better." Later that evening, sitting on my balcony overlooking the community gardens, I reflected on the journey of the past 18 months. The pain of betrayal had faded, replaced by appreciation for the new life that had emerged from that difficult period. Family wasn't just about blood or marriage certificates, but about respect and mutual care. The legal papers that Derek had signed without reading had ultimately forced a reckoning with this truth. While money and property can reveal true character, they can also create opportunities for growth and new beginnings. The most valuable lesson I had learned was about forgiveness without allowing continued mistreatment. I had forgiven Lisa for her failure to stand up for me, Derek for his disrespect, and his parents for their entitlement. But forgiveness didn't mean returning to a situation where my dignity was compromised. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to show them there are consequences to cruelty. As the evening stars appeared above, I thought about Maria and what she would think of my life now. The home I had built, the relationships I had nurtured, the boundaries I had established. I believed she would be proud of the balance I had found between standing my ground and maintaining connections that mattered. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? I hope my story shows that sometimes setting boundaries, even when painful, leads to unexpected blessings. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories from my generation. Share in the comments about a time when standing up for yourself changed everything. Thank you for listening, and remember, it is never too late to start a new chapter.